Dan gaan wij nou verder met de conferral of the Honorary Doctorate to Professor Lungisile Ntsebeza. Mag ik u allen vragen naar voren te komen? On the recommendation of the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and as advised by the Leiden University Executive Board, the Doctorate Board has resolved to award the title of Honorary Doctor to Lungisile Ntsebeza in recognition of his outstanding achievements. Professor Gewald is authorized to invest you, Professor Ntsebeza, with this title in the customary manner.
I gladly accept the office entrusted to me by the Rector Magnificus of the University. Born in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, the son of school teachers, Professor Lungisile Ntsebeza was exposed, in his own words, at an early age to reading newspapers and getting a sense of what was happening in the world. Given that he was born in the heyday of apartheid, it is not surprising that his understanding of the world was one molded by legalized, cradle-to-grave racial discrimination, land dispossession, forced removals, and a whole host of other injustices. Throughout his life, Professor Ntsebeza has struggled against these injustices as a scholar activist with far-reaching consequences for himself, his family, and acquaintances. At an early age, he joined self-study groups where, more often than not, their research material was deemed illegal. He was imprisoned as a student, and in prison, he completed a degree at the University of South Africa with a double major in politics and philosophy. Upon release, he was formally banished to a village where he demonstrated his continued commitment to learning by establishing a bookshop. Following an honors degree at the University of Cape Town, Professor Ntsebeza taught at Kanya College, an educational institution that actively sought to prepare disadvantaged students who had undergone Bantu education for university education. From the late 1990s, Professor Ntsebeza became directly involved in a number of research projects funded in the context of the South African-Netherlands Research Program on Alternatives in Development. Within this context, he co-supervised South African and Dutch doctoral students, including Nkululeko Mbandla, winner of the Africa Studies Center Thesis Award of 2012. Not surprisingly, Professor Ntsebeza's research and that of his students has tended to focus on land reform in South Africa, specifically on four main themes. The first concern has been to concentrate on the meaning of democracy for people living in the rural areas of South Africa, many of whom fall under the jurisdiction of traditional leaders who have not been elected. The second concern has been the post-1994 land reform program, particularly with regard to what the beneficiaries of the land do with it. And the third concern has been to look at food sovereignty and struggles against the use of environmentally harmful products in food production. And finally, Ntsebeza and his students have examined social movements in the land sector with a specific focus on the struggle of farm workers and farm dwellers. Throughout his active and distinguished career, Professor Lungisile Ntsebeza has consistently sought to carry forward the true values of a scholar: the fundamental rights to free thought, freedom of association, free speech, and an undying commitment to academic endeavor. With what in South Africa are termed impeccable struggle credentials, Ntsebeza could easily have entered into government or business. Instead, he has consciously chosen to stay true to his vocation as an educator, a scholar, and thus a liberator for all people, irrespective of race or creed. It is with respect for this uncompromising commitment to education and humanity that the University of Leiden will today confer upon Professor Lungisile Ntsebeza an Honorary Doctorate. Quoniam igitur vir humanissimus Lungisile Ntsebeza de humaniorum disciplina et praesertim de rebus Africanis eminenter meritus est, eum ex auctoritate nobis lega concessa, nunc doctorem honoris causa creamus, praedicamus, renuntiamus, cuius rei ut sit certa atque testate fidet, diploma plubicum manu rectoris facultatus decani, nec non promotores subscriptum, et academiae maiore sigillo confirmatum, ei tradetur, redetur, tribuetur.
All rise, please. It is my pleasurable duty, Honorary Doctor, to congratulate you on behalf of the Leiden University community on the achievement of this esteemed honor. Congratulations.
First and foremost, I wish to thank unreservedly the Board of Deans, as well as the Doctorate Board, for bestowing this honorary doctorate on me. I also want to thank Professor Jan-Bart, Gewald, the director of the African Studies Center, and his predecessor, Professor Ton Dietz, for having so much confidence in me, both as a person and for my work, by nominating me for this substantial Award. I should also add that I'm extremely delighted that my wife, Zolega, whose support has been and continues to be unwavering, is here with me to share this historical moment. Finally, I want to acknowledge with excitement the presence amongst us of Professor John Gewald, a world-renowned South African-born jurist who is currently residing here in the Netherlands and who, as you have heard, was professor in law here at Leiden University. I met Professor John Gewald in March 1977, when a group of us were, as Professor Gewald has mentioned, were arrested in Transkei in June 1976 and later charged for studying literature that, at the time, was considered to be subversive. Our case started in November 1976. On 11th March 1977, we brought in Professor Gewald to argue for our discharge on the grounds that we were charged for offenses against the personality of the state. In October 1976, the apartheid regime in South Africa had granted independence to its Transkei Bandustan. Independence had given Transkei a new personality. Professor Gewald's argument was that there was no evidence, and there was none, showing that we had committed offenses against the Transkei as it existed after its independence. Sadly, the presiding judge, Chief Justice George Munich, refused the application. But what was interesting is that he never gave any reasons why he turned down the application. Instead, he sent 4 of us to jail. And I must make a correction here. We were sentenced to 4 years imprisonment after spending 1.5 years in detention and as awaiting trial prisoners. I am singularly thrilled that almost 43 years later, and to be exact, 42 years, 11 months, I am meeting Professor Gewald in totally different circumstances, marking a recognition of not only my scholarship, but African scholarship that the architects of apartheid and their allies sought to deny. My scholarship, as again Professor Gewald has outlined, revolves around 3 themes: democratization in South Africa's countryside, land and equity in the context of the struggle against poverty, and social movements in the land sector. The theme around democratization in the countryside is informed by the argument that the recognition by the South African Constitution of the institution of traditional leadership, whose incumbents are unelected, coupled with the establishment of traditional and quiescent councils, compromise the post-1994 democratic project. These councils, my argument goes, are modeled along the lines of the apartheid-created tribal authorities and are characterized by having a majority of unelected members. This then gives rise to questions about the meaning of democracy for people residing in rural areas that are under the jurisdiction of these councils. I situate the issue of democratization in the countryside within the broader context of land dispossession in South Africa, paying particular focus on how, following national liberation leaders and progressive scholars, a tiny foreign minority ruled an indigenous majority. Divide and rule, mainly through co-opted chiefs, was the tool that colonialists, particularly the British, used. This takes me to my second theme, the land question in South Africa and how the ANC-led government has grappled and is grappling with it. My key argument in this regard is that Section 25 of the South African Constitution, the so-called property clause, poses a major hindrance to genuine land reform in South Africa. This clause recognizes property rights which were historically acquired violently and by fraud, without putting the historical question, this historical question, as a point of departure. My first major publication in this regard was in 2007, more than 10 years before the issue became a matter of public debate, as is the case as I speak. As is widely known and accepted, the South African Land Reform Program is a colossal failure. With less than 10% of more than 80% of agricultural land that was in white hands transferred to black hands. However, my research is not only looking at limitations of the South African Land Reform Program, it also focuses on the land that has been transferred to blacks and consider the broader question as to whether access to land makes a difference in the livelihoods of South Africans, both rural and urban. My main theme of my research is on agency. Here I specifically focus on the role of social movements in the struggle for land and livelihoods. Apart from limitations posed by the property clause to radical land reform in South Africa, as I've just outlined, I identified social movements in the land sector as another explanation of the slow pace of land reform in South Africa. They were, in my opinion, weak in the sense that they were unorganized and did not have a coherent plan of action. However, the historic farm workers farm workers revolts towards the end of 2012 into the beginning of 2013 compelled me to reconsider my position. I am now trying to follow their everyday struggles, their successes and challenges. Although the main focus of my work is the land question in South Africa, I have since 2012 been doing comparative research involving other African countries, notably Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. This has been made possible through one of the research chairs I hold, the A.C. Jordan Chair in African Studies. I have also managed, through my chairs, to put together a research team involving some of my colleagues, postdoctoral fellows that I guide and supervise, as well as my postgraduate students. This makes it possible for me to explore the range of issues covered in the 3 themes I outlined above. To conclude, this honor could not have come at a better time. On 20th November last year, the President of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, signed into law the Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act. Some of the provisions of this act are: 1, to provide for the recognition of traditional and Khoisan communities, leadership positions, and for the withdrawal of such recognition, and 2, to provide for the functions and roles of traditional and Khoisan leaders. The Act replaces the law I referred to earlier, which I argued resuscitated apartheid-era tribal authorities. What the Act, that is the new Act, does is to extend these structures to new territories, notably the Western and Northern Cape, with new actors, those identifying themselves as the Khoisan. A feature of these areas is that they never had Bantustans. The implication for my research is that I will have to pay more attention to the land question in the Western and Northern Cape, going back to the 17th century, when Dutch colonialists dispossessed the indigenous people of their land. Given that a significant amount of the archival material would have been in Dutch, I see opportunities of collaboration with my Dutch colleagues here at Leiden University. Opportunities I have already begun exploring. My return to the Netherlands in December this year as convener of a panel on land issues for the forthcoming Africa Knows conference that will be the culmination of the Africa 2020 commemoration undoubtedly provides another opportunity of consolidating this collaboration. Dankie, Enkosi, Dankie, thank you.